My name is Michael, and last Halloween, my family learned that some houses don't want to be lived in. We had just moved into a historic home at the edge of town, drawn in by its charming Victorian architecture and spacious rooms. My wife, Rachel, and our son Adam were excited to celebrate our first Halloween in the new neighborhood. The house had been vacant for years, but we didn't question why. We should have. Halloween night arrived, and everything started off normally. Adam dressed as a pirate, eager to fill his bucket with candy, while Rachel and I set up decorations on the porch. The neighborhood was alive with laughter and glowing jack-o'-lanterns, and for a while, it felt like any other Halloween then. The knocking started, not at the front door, from inside the house. At first we thought it was just the old pipes creaking, but as the night went on, the knocks became deliberate, slow, rhythmic, coming from the walls, the ceiling, the floorboards beneath our feet. Rachel and I exchanged uneasy glances, but we didn't want to scare Adam. We brushed it off, telling ourselves that old houses made noises. Then, Adam came running down the stairs, his face pale. "Mom, Dad, who's in my room?" Rachel and I froze. "No one, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile. "You probably just imagined it." He shook his head. I heard someone whispering. They were calling my name. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "What did they say?" Adam hesitated. "They said, it's almost time." Rachel and I rushed upstairs. Adam's room was empty, but the air was heavy, thick with something unseen. The curtains swayed, though the windows were shut, and in the corner of the room, where Adam's toy chest stood, we saw something that hadn't been there before. A door, a small wooden door, built into the wall, as if it had always been there. But we knew it hadn't. We had unpacked this room ourselves, and now, the knocking was coming from behind it. Rachel grabbed Adam and backed away, while I stepped closer, my breath hitching in my throat. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle. The moment my fingers touched the wood, a whisper slithered through the air. "Let us out." The door rattled violently. I stumbled back, grabbing Rachel's hand. "We're leaving now." We didn't pack. We didn't turn off the lights. We just ran. That night, we checked into a hotel, shaken and exhausted. In the morning, I went back to the house alone, determined to prove to myself that we had just imagined it. The house was silent. Still, I went upstairs to Adam's room, my heart hammering as I approached the corner. The door was gone. No seams, no hinges, just a solid wall where it had been. We never went back. We sold the house without explanation, not wanting to burden another family with what we had seen. But sometimes in the middle of the night, I wake up to the sound of knocking, soft, patient, waiting for me to open the door. My name is Emily, and last Halloween, my family and I moved into a new neighborhood, just in time for the festivities. The houses were beautifully decorated, the streets lined with glowing pumpkins, and the air buzzed with excitement. My husband, James, and I were thrilled to be part of such a lively community, and our 8-year-old son, Caleb, couldn't wait to go trick-or-treating. As we walked through the neighborhood that evening, something strange caught my eye. The house at the end of the cul-de-sac. Unlike the others, it wasn't decorated. No lights, no cobwebs, no skeletons. Just an eerie, dark house, standing in stark contrast to the festive glow of the street. The only thing in its yard was a row of large jack-o'-lanterns, their grins carved wider than usual, their eyes hollow and empty. "They look weird," Caleb muttered, pulling at my sleeve, "like they're watching us." I laughed nervously, brushing off his comment. "They're just pumpkins, sweetheart." But as we passed the house, a cold shiver ran down my spine. It felt like those lanterns were following us, their jagged smiles stretching wider in the flickering candlelight. Caleb hesitated near the sidewalk. "Mom, I think they moved." I turned to him, my stomach tightening. "Come on, buddy. Let's keep going." That night, after Caleb had gone to bed, James and I sat in the living room, unwinding from the long evening. The doorbell rang. I frowned. It was almost midnight, too late for trick-or-treaters. James went to the door and peeked through the peephole. No one's there. Another chime echoed through the house. I walked to the door, a growing unease creeping up my spine. When I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. The Jack-O single quotes dash lanterns. They were on our porch now. I looked up and down the street. Nothing. No kids, no pranksters, no movement at all. James stepped beside me. How the hell did they? The flames inside the pumpkins flickered violently, as if disturbed by an invisible wind. Then, one by one, they went out, and the door slammed shut on its own. The house went dark. The silence was deafening. My heart pounded as I fumbled for the light switch. The bulbs flickered, barely illuminating the room. Then, a sound, a whispering, dry and raspy, coming from inside the house. James grabbed my arm. Upstairs. Now, we ran to Caleb's room, throwing the door open. He was still in bed, fast asleep. Then, the whispering stopped. For a moment, all was still. Then, I saw them. Shadows stretched unnaturally from the corners of the room, creeping toward Caleb's bed. They were long and twisted, their movements slow and deliberate. I reached for him, but the room suddenly plunged into darkness. The whispering returned closer now, surrounding us. Then, a single voice, breathy and cold. "Carve a smile. Let us in." The lights burst back on. The shadows were gone. Caleb stirred in his bed, yawning, as if nothing had happened. James and I barely spoke as we took turns keeping watch for the rest of the night. At dawn, we gathered every single jack-o'-lantern in our yard and smashed them to pieces. We never saw them again. But I still hear the whispering sometimes, soft, waiting, just outside the door. My name is Brian, and last Halloween, my family experienced something that made us rethink ever celebrating again. My wife Laura and I had always loved the holiday, setting up elaborate decorations and making sure our house was the go-to place for the best candy. Our daughter, Sophie, was 6 years old and had been counting down the days until she could wear her little witch costume and collect as much candy as possible. Everything started out normal. Kids dressed as monsters and superheroes knocked on our door, shouting trick or treat as we handed out candy. Sophie went out with Laura, while I stayed behind to keep the house running. By 10 p.m., the crowd had mostly thinned out, and I was just about to turn off the porch light when the doorbell rang one last time. I opened the door, expecting a late-night group of teenagers. Instead, there was just one child. He was small, barely reaching my waist, dressed in an old-fashioned clown costume, something from another era. His mask was pale white, with painted-on features that looked too realistic. He didn't say a word, didn't hold out a candy bag, just stood there, staring at me. I forced a chuckle. "Hey there, kid. You're a little late, but I think I've got some candy left." The boy tilted his head slightly, but still said nothing. A chill ran through me. There was something deeply unsettling about the way he stood, completely motionless. The black void of his mask's eyes locked onto mine. "All right," I muttered, grabbing a handful of candy and dropping it into an empty bag hanging at his side. "Happy Halloween." He still didn't move. I cleared my throat, shifting uncomfortably. "Okay, kid, you should probably head home now. It's late." The boy's head twitched slightly, then he spoke. "Can Sophie come out to play?" My blood ran cold. I hadn't said my daughter's name. I hadn't seen this kid before. My pulse hammered in my ears as I slowly stepped back, gripping the door. "How do you know my daughter?" I asked, my voice unsteady. The boy didn't answer. He just stood there, the mask's painted grin stretching across his face. Then, the porch light flickered. For a split second, the mask didn't look like a mask anymore. I slammed the door shut, locking it as my breath came in short gasps. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone to call Laura, but before I could dial, I heard a soft, rhythmic tapping on the window. I turned slowly. The boy was there, standing just outside the glass, his face inches from the window pane. "Sophie," he whispered, "come outside." I yanked the curtains closed and backed away. My heart pounded as I waited, every second stretching into eternity. Finally, after what felt like hours, I worked up the courage to peek outside. He was gone. Laura and Sophie returned home soon after, and I told Laura everything. She tried to calm me down, saying it was probably just a prank, but I could see the fear in her eyes. That night, I barely slept at 3 a.m. I woke up to a sound just outside Sophie's room. Laughter, small, childlike. I ran to her room, throwing the door open. She was asleep, safe in her bed. But the window was open, and on the windowsill sat a small, crumpled candy bag, empty. My name is Jessica, and my family has always loved Halloween. Every year, we decorate our house with glowing pumpkins, animatronic skeletons, and cobwebs draped over every surface. My husband, Matt, loves handing out candy, and my son, Tyler, enjoys dressing up and going trick-or-treating. It's always been a night of laughter and fun, but last year, something changed. It started with the candy bowl. Matt had picked up a large ceramic bowl from an antique shop in town. It was black with strange carvings along the rim, symbols I didn't recognize. "Looks spooky, right?" he had said with a grin, placing it on our porch and filling it with candy. I didn't think much of it at first, but as the night went on, I noticed something odd. The candy never seemed to run out. Kids came and went, grabbing handfuls of treats, but every time I checked, the bowl was still full. I assumed Matt was refilling it when I wasn't looking, but when I asked him, he swore he hadn't touched it. That was when Tyler came running inside, his face pale. "Mom," he whispered, "who's the man in the yard?" My heart skipped a beat. I rushed to the front door and looked outside. The street was filled with kids and parents, but no one unusual. "Where?" I asked. Tyler pointed toward the sidewalk. He was standing right there, just staring at the house. He was wearing a mask, but it didn't look like a mask. It looked like a face that wasn't finished. A shiver ran through me. "It's probably just a costume, sweetheart." I forced a smile. Nothing to worry about. But I was worried. The night wore on, and I kept an eye on the candy bowl. The kids continued taking candy, but the level never dropped. I reached in to take a piece myself and my fingers brushed against something cold. I yanked my hand back. The candy shifted slightly, revealing something beneath it. A tooth, a human tooth, yellowed and jagged. I gasped and knocked the bowl over. The candy spilled across the porch and underneath. More teeth. Dozens of them, scattered like forgotten relics. The front door creaked open behind me. Tyler stood there, his face blank. "Mom," he whispered. "He's inside." I turned, my breath catching in my throat. Standing in the hallway was a figure, tall and thin. Its face was smooth, unfinished, as if someone had started sculpting it but never completed the work. Its hollow sockets locked onto mine as it took a step forward. The lights flickered. The air grew thick and cold. I don't remember what happened next. Just darkness. The next morning we woke up in our beds. The candy bowl shattered on the porch. The house was silent. Nothing was missing. Nothing was broken. Except for one thing. Tyler's voice. He hasn't spoken a word since that night, and sometimes, when I pass by his room, I hear whispers coming from the dark dot, as if someone else is still there. My name is David, and every year, my wife and I go all out for Halloween. We decorate the house, carve pumpkins, and set up a haunted maze in our backyard for the neighborhood kids. It's our favorite time of year. But last Halloween, something happened that made me never want to celebrate again. It started when I found the mask. We were at a small thrift shop, looking for last-minute decorations, when I saw it hanging on the wall. It was unlike any mask I'd ever seen, pale, almost flesh-colored, with hollow black eyes and a twisted grin. Something about it made my stomach churn, but I couldn't look away. The shop owner saw me staring and smiled. "That one's special," she said. "One of a kind." I asked where it came from, but she just shook her head. "If you like it, take it. No charge." I should have left it there, but I didn't. That night, as we set up the decorations, I put the mask on for a laugh, planning to scare my wife. The moment it touched my skin, a shiver ran through my body. It felt wrong, tight, like it was molding to my face. My vision blurred for a second, and I heard something whisper. Faint, but clear. "Let me in." I ripped the mask off, my hands shaking. My wife laughed, thinking I was just playing along, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me as the night went on. The trick-or-treaters came and went, and I almost forgot about the mask. Almost. But then, around midnight, I heard footsteps outside. I opened the door, expecting to see leftover kids or pranksters. Instead, I saw him. A man stood at the end of our driveway, wearing the mask. My mask, except I had left it inside. My breath caught in my throat. The man didn't move, didn't speak. He just stood there, head tilted slightly, staring at me, with those hollow black eyes. I stepped back, heart hammering in my chest, and slammed the door. I turned to tell my wife, but she was already looking past me, her face pale. "David, where's the mask?" I ran to the table where I had left it. It was gone. A slow knock echoed through the house. I grabbed a bat and threw the door open, ready to confront whoever or whatever was out there. But the driveway was empty. The only thing left was the mask, sitting neatly on the porch. I don't remember bringing it back inside. I don't remember anything after that moment. But the next morning, my wife found me in the backyard, standing perfectly still, the mask in my hands. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know where I went. All I know is that I can still hear the whisper, and sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I see the mask staring back.